Hey Stitchers, your girl Chris here. Welcome to my channel on social. If this is the first time that you're clicking to join one of my videos, then welcome to my space. I really hope that you like it here. If you do, then please consider subscribing and turning on your notification bell. Now you guys, let us talk about classic button-down shirts. I personally love a good classic button-down shirt or shirt dress, but I do know that it can be a little bit discouraging for beginner sewists to tackle a button-down shirt because there are some finicky moments and some tricky parts to its construction. Let's think collars, let's think cuffs, let's think plackets, let's think buttons and buttonholes. And so I'm really hoping that this upcoming series will be beneficial to many of you in the sewing community. It is a stitch by stitch of a classic shirt pattern. Now, even though I'm going to be using one particular shirt pattern to demonstrate the construction, you can use these tips and tricks with any button-down shirt or shirt dress pattern. Now, I am going to be using the Grainline Archer Button shirt because I just love this shirt pattern and I have made it quite a few times. I did share a video here on the channel featuring 5 button-down shirts that you might want to try out, and I'll go ahead and pop the link to that video right there so you can run on over and check out alternative patterns to the Grainline Archer. As I said, even though I have selected the Archer shirt for this stitch by stitch series, you can use any shirt pattern that you desire. Now, this video is a long video, and so what I have decided to do is to cut it up into 4 parts. I think it's 4 parts. I hope it's 4 parts. Full disclosure, at the time of recording this intro, I haven't finished editing my video. Oh my goodness, you guys. At the moment, it is 2 hours long, and so I am thinking that 4 parts with just about 30 or maybe a little bit more than or less than 30 minutes is going to be ideal and give you an opportunity to fully digest and appreciate the information that I have shared. So for today's video, I am going to be sharing with you part 1 of the stitch by stitch series featuring the Grainline Archer. As I said, it's going to be a pretty long video, so grab yourself a cup of tea and let's get right into it. So these are all the pieces that I'm going to be using for my Grainline Archer, and I am making view A, which is the one with the yoke and the pleat at the back. Now view B has a yoke option with a gathered back. That is not the view that I'm doing. I am doing view A. Now I have decided to choose my starting size based on my high bust measurement. Now I recently shared a video here on the channel showcasing how to take your measurements and how to go about choosing your starting size for your patterns. So if that might be of interest to you, then I'll pop the video right here on the screen so that you can run ahead and pick up some tips and tricks on choosing your starting pattern sizes. So as I said, I have chosen mine based on my high bust measurement, which puts me at a size 12 for the neckline, the arm side, and the shoulders, and I have blended out to the size 14 at the waistline down to the hemline. Now I have also gone ahead and performed a 1/2 inch full bust adjustment because this pattern has been drafted for a B cup and I am sewing C cup. So if your sewing cup size is bigger than a B cup, then I would definitely recommend choosing your size based on your high bust measurement and then doing a full bust adjustment according to your finished cup size. Now on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you have a sewing cup size that is a size A, then I would also recommend choosing your pattern size based on your high bust measurement and then doing a small bust adjustment, which is quite similar to the full bust adjustment, but instead of adding additional width, we are going to be taking it away. Now these are all the pattern pieces that I need for view A, and I'm just going to walk through them with you very quickly. Now they're not in any particular order. Now you're going to need pattern piece number 13, which is the collar stand, and you need to cut 2 of these on fold as well as cut 1 of interfacing. Now I've gone ahead and done the prep work already, so I have actually interfaced 1 of my collar stand pieces. You might want to grab piece number 19, which is the pocket. Now this piece is optional. I have decided that I'm going to use 1 pocket piece. The instructions have you cut 2 if you want to use 2 pocket pieces, 1 on either side of your shirt. But as I said, I have decided that I want to use 1 pocket piece. And I've actually gone ahead and cut mine on the bias because I wanted to make use of the diagonal stripes. So this is my pocket piece. You're also going to need pattern piece number 12, which is the undercollar, and the undercollar piece is cut on the bias. So it's actually cut too, so that you can cut them on the bias. I really like this about the Archer shirt, that the undercollar piece is cut on the bias, which makes for, in my opinion, a super professional collar. So this is the undercollar piece, piece number 12. So with the undercollar, we're also going to need the upper collar piece. Now the upper collar piece is cut one on the fold and cut one of interfacing. As with my collar stand, I have gone ahead and cut my interfacing, and I have interfaced my collar piece already. Now I am using piece number 15, which is the cuff piece for view A. Now there's a separate cuff piece for view B, which just has a straight edge instead of this shaped edge. So you can choose whether you want to use the cuff piece for view A or for view B. As I said, I have opted for the piece for view A. And this is cut 2 of the cuff piece. And then there is a separate pattern piece for the interfacing for the cuff. And the pattern piece for the interfacing for the cuff cuts off right down the center line, because we're going to interface only 1/2 of our cuff piece, which I have gone ahead and done already. This is the piece, pattern piece number 16. So this is what the interfacing piece looks like. It is just half of the cuff piece. Now pattern piece number 10 is the yoke piece, and you're going to cut 2 of these on the fold. Now after I had cut both of my pieces on the fold, I thought about it a little bit more and decided that I wanted my back yoke piece to play with the stripes a little bit more, and so I went ahead and cut another set of yoke pieces, but I cut 2 instead, and I cut them on the bias just so that when they're pieced together I can have a chevron effect on my back yoke. Now this is not absolutely necessary. Depending on the fabric that you're choosing to use, then you might just want to go ahead and cut both of your yoke pieces on the fold, which is what I initially did before I had a change of thought. So this is pattern piece number 10. Now you're also going to need pattern piece number 14, which is the sleeve placket, and you're going to cut 2. You'll also need pattern piece number 9, and this is the sleeve piece. Now I haven't cut my sleeve yet out of my fabric because I need to trace off my sleeve piece so that I can do a forward shoulder adjustment on my sleeve piece. So I still need to go ahead and do that, but I'll have it ready by the time we get around to working with the sleeves. So you want to go ahead and cut 2 sleeve pieces. That is 2 of pattern piece number 9, and you want to make sure that your sleeve pieces are mirrored. Now for view A, you want to cut 1 on the fold of piece number 6, which is your lower back bodice piece. So I have gone ahead and cut 1 of those on the fold as per the instructions. Now you might notice that there are some pencil markings on this piece, and that is because I went ahead and did some adjustments to my pattern piece. I did a 1/2 inch sloping shoulder adjustment, and I also raised my back waistline by 1/2 inch and did a 1/4 inch sway back adjustment. Now I do have a tutorial here on the channel for a sway back adjustment, so you can run ahead and check that one out just in case you also need to perform a sway back adjustment on your back pattern piece. Now for view A, the instructions have you cut 1 left front bodice piece, which is pattern piece number 1, and 1 right front bodice piece, which is pattern piece number 2. However, you guys, I have gone ahead and cut 2 of my left front bodice piece, but I have created mirror images. And that is really just because I felt lazy. Now I went ahead and did a 1/2 inch full bust adjustment on my pattern piece. And because pattern piece number 1 and pattern piece number 2 are not identical, it would have meant that I would have performed my full bust adjustment on both of the pieces. Now, as per the instructions, the right front bodice piece has an additional placket, which I think is piece number 3, that is attached to your right front, center front, to form your button band, whereas your left piece has a fold over button placket. Now, I just figured that I can get away with doing the fold over button placket on both my left and my right front pieces, and so I went ahead and cut 2 of pattern piece number 1, but I cut them as mirror images. So if you want to follow suit, feel free to go ahead and do that. Just make sure that your pattern pieces are mirrored. If not, you can cut 1 of pattern piece number 1, which is your left front bodice piece, and 1 of pattern piece number 2, which is your right front bodice piece. And then you will also have to cut your right front button placket piece, as well as the button placket interfacing that corresponds with the right front button placket piece. Now, I could have gone ahead and done the full bust adjustment on the right front placket piece, but as I said, I was feeling kind of lazy and I decided that I could just get away with doing 2 of the left front bodice piece. So just bear that in mind as we progress this sew with me. So once you have all of your pattern pieces cut out, make sure that you clip your notches and make whatever markings you might need to make. Make sure you go ahead and interface all of the pieces that require interfacing, and then we can get started on constructing our button-down shirt. So this is my left front bodice piece, and I also have my right front bodice piece. You might notice that there's a pink line across my left front bodice piece, and this is indicating my pocket placement piece. Now, I could have done the same thing on the opposite side, but as I already mentioned, I'm only putting a pocket on one side. Now, the first thing the instructions ask you to do is to go ahead and to create your front button band piece. To do that, you're meant to fold along your first set of notches, both clipped at the top and bottom of your bodice piece, and then fold again over to your second notched piece. Now, to make this step a little bit easier, I'm just going to grab my gridded ruler and a dissolvable pen so that I can mark in my fold lines. Now, I have gone ahead and measured the pattern pieces, and each fold line is a distance of 1 inch. Now, if you do not have a gridded ruler, I would definitely recommend it if you're serious about fitting adjustments and about sewing as well, but mainly fitting adjustments. And also go ahead and grab yourself a disappearing ink marker. Now, you can find both of these things in my Amazon store, and I have linked it down below in the description box. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw in 1 inch from my center front cut line, and then I'm going to go ahead and draw in the second fold line, which is 1 inch away from the first fold line. Now, I am working with a striped fabric, and much to my dismay, the stripes on my fabric are not completely on grain. And so I don't want to depend only on my stripes for my lines. Now, that does irritate me just a little bit, because I think it would be so much neater if I can fold along the line straight down the center front. But I'm going to take it to my ironing board and press it into place, and then I can see how that looks. If it's jaunting to the eye or not, maybe I can tweak it just a little bit, but that will mean that my center front piece will not be completely on grain. So let's take it to the ironing board and iron our placket pieces into place. Now, if you're following the traditional instructions, you'll only be doing this method on your left front bodice piece. For your right front bodice piece, you're going to have to go ahead and sew the right front placket to your right front bodice piece. If you are following me and what I have decided to do, which is to just cut 2 of the left front piece mirrored, then you can go ahead and repeat this process on your opposite shirt front piece. So I have pressed both of my front placket pieces into place, and to help with both the pressing and the stitching that is to come, I did use some stitch witchery. This is just the Dritz brand, to help to hold my placket pieces in place. Now, I swear by this stuff, you guys. It makes pressing hems and other little tricky parts so much easier, and it will mean that I don't need to have any pins down my front placket piece. And it will also mean that when I take this to my sewing machine, I can top stitch it from the right side of my fabric instead of, as per the pattern instructions, edge stitching it from the wrong side of my fabric. Now I just find that the top stitching looks so much neater and so much more professional than does edge stitching from the wrong side. Now there are times when I do have to utilize an edge stitch from the wrong side, but where I can, I prefer to top stitch down the front side of my pattern pieces. So using my stitch witchery just helps to hold my placket piece in place, make sure that it's not slipping around when I'm trying to top stitch from the right side. And because my top stitching is going to be very close to the inside edge, but I'm going to do it on the outside of my piece, I did not want to risk this placket piece like shifting around on the inside. Now I put the stitch witchery down my front placket piece, but I stopped about 5 or 6 inches from the bottom of my shirt, and that is because when I get towards the hemming portion of this make, I am going to want to turn my placket to the right side and then do my hem. Now I'm not sure if that is what the pattern instructions tell you to do. I haven't got that far into the instructions as yet, but that is how I like to finish my shirts. I think that also makes it so much more professional than simply double turning your hem on your shirt. So that is why I have not sealed the bottom piece of my placket. So again, I have stopped about 5 or so inches from the bottom of my hemline. Now at this point, the pattern tells you to go ahead and edge stitch it. I'm not going to do that just yet, again, because I'm going to do the top stitching, and because my piece is being held into place by my stitch witchery, then I don't have to rush and do this portion. So instead, I'm going to put these pieces aside, and then I'm going to start working on the pocket piece that I'm going to need to attach to my front left bodice piece. So this is my pocket piece, and as you have seen, I drew in a line on my pattern piece because I wanted to shift my pocket piece to cut it on the bias. So I wanted to make sure that I had the accurate marking in that I was going to use as a reference to mark and line up my pattern piece with my fabric. And this is what my pocket piece looks like beneath. Now I have started prepping my pocket piece already. So the pocket piece is attached to using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is smaller than the rest of the pattern construction. The rest of the seams are constructed using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, except where the pattern specifically tells you otherwise, and that includes on the pocket piece, which is only constructed using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now because I went ahead and cut my pocket piece on the bias, I also cut strips of interfacing that were a 1/4 inch in thickness, and I ironed them only to the seam allowances of my pocket piece. This is just to stabilize my side seams, and because it's cut on the bias, and I did not want to risk my pocket pieces being tugged out of proportion. So I went ahead and attached my 1/4 inch bias strips just down the 2 long edges and across the bottom edge. Once I had done that, I also pressed my pocket pieces a 1/4 inch to the wrong side. Now at the top of your pocket piece, there are 2 sets of notches which indicate your fold lines. Now the pattern instructions tell you to fold your pocket piece along your first set of fold lines and then to fold it a second time along the second set of fold lines, but I'm not going to follow those instructions. Instead, I have pressed my first fold line into place with the wrong sides of my fabric together. Once that is done, I have opened out the pressed side edges that I did, and I'm folding my second fold line so that my pattern pieces are now right sides together like so. Once I have this done, I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch from right here at the edge of my fold line up to the top of my pocket, and then I'm going to repeat that on the opposite side, taking care to backstitch at both the start and at the end. Once this is done, I'm going to trim off the edges of my pocket, and then I'm going to flip it so that my fold line is concealed towards the inside of my pocket piece. Once I have that in place, I'll press it and then go ahead and top stitch on the outside of my pocket. But let's break it down and do it bit by bit. So the first thing you want to do is to iron along your first fold line, wrong sides together, and then iron your second crease so that it is right sides together, making sure that your first fold line is held in place. Then we're going to go ahead and stitch using a 1/4 inch seam allowance along both pocket edges. So I've stitched using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, And now I'm just going to grab my pinking shears and just snip the corners of my pocket like so. Now make sure that you don't snip through your stitching line right here. Now that that is done, I can flip my pocket like so. And once I push my pocket corners out, then I'm going to have a very neat finish on my pocket. Now, because I had already pressed the edges of my pocket into place, you can see what a nice crisp pocket line I'm going to have. Now I'm going to poke out my pockets, and then I'm going to press along my line once again, just to make sure that I have a very crisp line at the top. And then I'm going to go ahead and top stitch along my pocket. Now, if you're going to do it from the wrong side, you want to edge stitch along your pocket line. Now again, I'm going to grab for a little bit more stitch witchery just to hold my pocket piece in place right along here. That will allow me to top stitch a lot easier from the right side of my pocket piece. Now, another tip I wanted to share with you with the pocket is that when I get to the bottom of my pocket edges, I want to create kind of mitered corner. Now, I have already pressed my pocket to the inside. So I fold it over the long side, and then I fold it over the short side on top of it. And can you see that you can get a little peek of like a raw edge right here? Now, to counter that, I'm going to open back my pocket, and then this little triangle right here, I'm going to bring it forward right along the point of both of the long side and the short side, like so. Just going to hold it into place. Then I'm going to turn my long side back in, wrong sides together, and then turn the bottom piece up again, wrong sides together. And that is going to give you a mitered corner. I just find that this is also a lot neater and tidier, both from the inside of the pocket and definitely from the outside of the pocket. Now, this seam allowance is quite small, which makes it a little bit trickier to do, but it is not impossible, and I think it's well worth it in the long run. So I'm just going to go ahead and put my iron on top of this again to hold it in place, and then I can look about securing my pocket piece to my shirt piece. So my top stitching has been done, and this is what my pocket looks like from the outside. My corners, I think I stretched them just a little bit when I was pushing them out. Again, I did cut my pocket piece on the bias, so you want to be really careful when handling your pocket piece if you decide to use the bias instead of the grain line, and also depending on what your fabric substrate is. Now, I am using a quite stable fabric. I think this is a cotton shirting if I'm not mistaken. I'll go ahead and double check, and then I'll put the information down below in the description box. But I think it looks pretty neat, and so it's time to attach it to my left front bodice piece. To do that, as I said, I already put my marking in for my pocket placement, which is also on your pattern piece, and I'm just going to line up the top of my pocket with my placement line. Now, I can tell when I put my pocket piece down that I stretched my corners just a little bit because they are not completely straight from the tip of the pocket to the base of the pocket. It's not something that you probably will notice with the naked eye unless you're really peeking at my pocket, but I just wanted to point it out in case the eagle eye amongst you wanted to comment about my pocket pieces. Once I have placed it, I'm just going to use some pins and pin the pocket piece into place like so. Then once that is done, I can take it to the machine, and then I'm going to edge stitch using my edge stitch foot right along the outer corners of my pocket, starting at the top of the pocket, working down to the bottom, across the bottom, back up to the top, and making sure to back stitch both at the starting of my stitch line and at the ending. I might also consider doing a tack at the edges of my pocket just for a little bit extra stability, so that the constant in and out of your pocket at the top won't cause your stitches to pop. So I think I'm going to go ahead and reinforce my stitches right at the pocket openings. Now our pocket is done. I have gone ahead and reinforced the edges as I said, and now we can get started on constructing our back pieces. So I'm just going to push these pieces out of the way and pull out my back yoke and my back bodice piece. This is the back bodice piece, and the first thing we're going to do is turn our piece so that the wrong side is facing up. So you should have had your notches in place on your back bodice piece. So what the instructions have you do is to pinch along your notch, then move it towards your center marking, and then repeat the process on the opposite side. But what I am going to do is I'm going to pinch it along my notch, like so, and I'm just going to pin it into place. And I'm going to take it to my machine and I'm going to baste down about 2 inches right along my fold line, and I'm going to repeat the process with the opposite notch, and then I'll be back to show you what's next. Once I have basted along my line, I'm then going to fold it towards the center marking and pin it into place, just like so. Head back to the machine, and then I'm going to baste within the seam allowance. So I'm just going to baste it using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once that has been done, it will make it so much easier to press my back pleat, and then I can always go ahead and remove the basting stitches when I'm done. Right, so my back piece has been done and pressed, and look at how sharp my pleat is in the back. Now I'm just going to put this to the side for the minute, and I have grabbed my 2 back yoke pieces. Now you're meant to cut your back yoke pieces on the fold, but as I indicated, I wanted to create like this chevron effect, and so I cut 2. I've also marked in the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance that I factored into my pattern when I was cutting it out, and I have pressed back along the seam allowance line. That is going to help me hopefully with my pattern matching. Now when I place them right sides together, I want to make sure that my pattern is matching up along my seam line, like so. Let's zoom in a little bit. All right, so this is one side, my seam allowance is opened out. On the other side, my seam allowance is folded in, and I just want to line up my stripes just to create a chevron effect. Then I can pinch it right along the line, open it out, and then put my pins right the way down before taking it to my machine and stitching it using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So this is what my back yoke piece looks like. Not bad, right? That chevron is chevroning. Oh my goodness, not bad for my pattern matching attempt. Now I've gone ahead and I've stay stitched around the neckline of my back yoke. Now I don't see this step in the pattern instructions. I hope I did not overlook it, but I find this very useful to prevent your neckline from stretching out, particularly since I cut my back yoke pieces on the bias. I am going to repeat the same process on my front bodice pieces. Even though my fabric is pretty stable, I still don't want to take the chance and stretch out my neckline. I would absolutely recommend that you stay stitch your neckline as well, no matter what type of fabric you're using, but even more importantly, if you're using a drapier fabric. Now when you stay stitch, you want to use your regular stitch length, or you can perhaps reduce your stitch length just a little bit to make it smaller, and you want to stitch along the neckline within the seam allowance. You want to start at your shoulder seam and work inwards towards the center of your neckline, and then flip your piece over, starting from the outside and working your way in. You don't want to stitch one continuous swoop from one shoulder seam right the way around the curve and up to the other shoulder seam. You want to do it in portions, from the outer, working your way in, from the outer, working your way in, and repeat the same thing on your front bodice piece. Now that I have my neckline stay stitched and my yoke piece has been sewn together, I've gone ahead and I've attached my yoke main to my bodice main right sides together. So I've pinned it in place, and the next step is to go and baste it in place. Now I am going to stitch it using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, which is within the seam allowance for this bodice, which is 1/2 an inch. When I attach my second yoke piece, then I'll go ahead and stitch it using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now you can decide to skip the basting process altogether and attach your yoke lining, right side of yoke lining to wrong side of bodice piece, and then just do one stitch, one time. I am not going to do that for the purposes of the demonstration. I am going to baste my yoke main to my bodice main, and then I'll come back and attach my yoke lining piece. So let's go ahead to the sewing machine to do that. So this is my yoke lining piece, And before I stitch my yoke lining to my bodice piece, I'm going to attach my label. Now, I don't know about you guys, but attaching my label is one of my most favorite parts of making my own clothes. I just feel like it's really a very nice and unique touch to my me-made garments. So I just want to fold my piece in half so that I can identify the central point of my yoke, and I'm just making the marking. And then I'm going to use my ruler just to draw a line right the way down the center of my yoke piece. I am now going to use my Nancy Zimmerman seam gauge. This one is also in my Amazon store, linked below. And I'm just going to slide it to about 3 or 4 inches. Let's say 3 inches from the bottom. And then I'm just going to draw in a line so that I have a cross in the center of my yoke piece. Now I have grabbed my label. It just says on social circa 2024. Now every year when I get my labels made, I like to add a circa and the year that the labels were made in. So I've got from circa 2021 right the way up to circa 2024, and next year it will say circa 2025, and that is just an easy way for me to remember when I made a particular garment when I pull it out of my closet. So I'm just going to line up my label with the marking that I put on my yoke, and I'm just going to pin it into place. Take it to my machine, and I'm going to attach my label to my yoke facing piece. And after that, I can attach my yoke facing to my bodice piece. So this is what my yoke looks like with my label intact. And now I'm going to grab my main bodice piece that I already attached my main yoke to. And I'm going to place the right side of my yoke to the wrong side of my main bodice piece. So I'll just flip it over like this so that the right side is facing in this direction. And I'm going to, in effect, sandwich my main bodice piece between my yoke main, which is on this side, and my yoke lining, which is on this side. So go ahead and pin them into place. Put a pin at the outer edge, like so. I'll then line up my center markings. Like so. I'll pin the opposite end. And then I can go ahead and distribute my fabric evenly, make sure it lines up nicely, pin it into place, take it to my sewing machine, and this time we're going to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So we've attached the yoke lining and the yoke main to our bodice, and now we're going to grade our seam allowances. Now to grade my seam allowances, I'm going to use my pinking shears, and just in case you don't know, pinking shears are the kind of shears that have a serrated edge, just like so. So in order to grade my seams, we want to cut each seam a little bit shorter than the one in front of it. Now the longest seam is going to be the seam that you can see through the front of your garment. So in my case, the longest seam is going to be my yoke main piece. So I'm going to leave my yoke main piece as it is for now because it has a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then I'm going to grade down the second piece of fabric, which is between the 2 yoke pieces, and that is our bodice main. So I'm just going to trim it down. I'm going to try to trim off maybe about 1/8 inch or so. So I want to make sure that I'm holding the other seams out of the way. You want to take your time and make sure that you're not clipping into any of the other seams, and more importantly, that you're not cutting into your main bodice piece. Right, so I finished grading down my bodice piece. Now it is not as neat as I would have liked, but I don't think it really matters in the grand scheme of things. So next I'm going to grade down my yoke facing piece. So I'm going to repeat the process, hold the other 2 pieces out of the way. and use my pinking shears just to cut down the seam. Now, the bulkier your fabric is, the more important it will be to grade your seams. It's going to improve the pressing and just the general lay of your yoke pieces to your main bodice piece. I'm going to repeat the process right the way through my yoke facing piece. Alright, this is what it looks like when I have graded both the yoke facing and the main bodice piece. So can you see that the seams are now staggered within the seam allowance? Now the next step is just going to be to trim off a little bit of the yoke main piece, just so that it's a little bit longer than the other two, like so. So this is going to reduce a lot of bulk within our seam when we go to press up our yoke pieces. Alright, so it's time to press your yoke pieces, and when I'm pressing mine, I first like to run my iron over the pieces as sewn, just to help set my stitches, like so. Then I want to turn my piece over, and I'm going to press my seam allowances up towards my yoke facing from the wrong side, like so. Then I will flip it over and press it again, making sure to hold my fabric taut to make sure that my seam is laying as flat as possible. Now, if I'm using a very bulky fabric, then I might go in with my clapper just to help flatten my seams a little bit more. Because my fabric is so lightweight, I'm not really fussed to use my clapper on my fabric. That is what it looks like. Then I want to push up my main yoke piece and repeat the process. Pressing it up, making sure to hold my fabric taut so that my seams are as flat as possible, just like so. Now you might think you can skip the process of pressing your yoke, but I definitely would not recommend that you skip any pressing at all. It's really important to put your iron on your seams to help set your stitches and also to help your seams to lay as flat as possible. Now this is what it looks like on the outside. I'm just going to flip it over to the inside, and one more time I'm just going to push up my seam just like so, so that it's nice and flat at the seam line. Once my yoke has been pressed into place and it looks nice and flat on both sides, then I can move on to the next step. Now that we have our back pieces prepped and ready, we can grab for our front pieces once again. Now, to make it a little bit easier, I'm actually going to lay down my front pieces first with the right sides facing towards me, like so. I'm then going to take my back piece and I'm going to fold my yoke facing out of the way so it falls towards my shirt hem, and then I'm going to turn my back piece over so that the right sides of my yoke main are going to be lining up with the right sides of my shirt. I'm going to pin them into place, and then I'm going to take it to my machine and baste it in place using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Right, so we have attached our front pieces to our back main yoke piece like so. Now you can see that my yoke lining is still free. So at this point, I'm going to do the burrito method so that I can attach my yoke facing shoulder seams to the rest of my bodice. So in order to do the burrito method, I probably should turn it this side out. So this is my front piece. We want to grab our front bodice pieces and our back bodice piece as well. And we're just going to roll them up as you would roll up a burrito. When you roll it up, you will start to see your yoke facing piece appear beneath you. With this held in quite tightly, we want to make sure that it is out of the way when we go to pin. We then want to bring up our yoke facing piece towards the rest of our bodice piece like so. And then we can pin it into place. With one side done, we're going to pin the opposite side. Now again, you want to make sure that your piece beneath is flat, it has no puckers, and you want to make sure that the rest of your shirt that you have rolled up is tucked neatly to the inside so that it does not get caught when you go to do your stitching. And you're going to pin your opposite side into place. Now that we have both sides pinned into place, we're going to take this to the sewing machine and stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. This is what our shirt burrito looks like. You can see that our main bodice pieces are stuck or stuffed within the shirt. Now that we have all of the shoulder seams sewn together, we want to go ahead and grade the seam allowances once again. So again, the yoke facing piece is going to be graded the shortest, and then we're going to stagger the main one and then the yoke main piece, just in the same way that we did the facing towards the back. Again, make sure that you're moving the rest of your seams out of the way, and make sure that you don't inadvertently cut into your shirt. You will cry real tears, you guys. So I'm going to repeat the process on the bodice main piece and on my yoke main piece. With our seams graded nicely, it's time for a little bit of sewing magic. We want to pull into the neckline area of our shirt, and we're going to pull out our shirt pieces through the neckline. And then we can unwrap it, and here we have our shirt back piece is now attached to our shirt front pieces, and we have neatly finished seam lines at our shoulders. No raw edges at all. They are all encased on the inside, sandwiched between our two yoke pieces. Now that that is done, we want to head back to the ironing board and to press our pieces in the same way that we did before. We're going to press them away from our front main pieces towards our back. We're going to turn it over to the right side and press it again, just to make sure we get our seams to lay as flat as possible. Now the instructions tell you at this point that you can go ahead and edge stitch along your shoulder seams and also top stitch along your back yoke piece, just for some nice finishing. I think I'm actually going to skip the top stitching on this shirt because it is a striped shirt. I just don't know if I'm going to like how it looks, and because I'm using this fairly lightweight fabric, I don't have to worry about too much bulk. Now if I were using a different fabric, maybe if I were using, for example, a plain linen fabric, I would want to do that top stitching and that edge stitching to just fancy up my shirt a little bit. Or if I was using something like, say, denim, I might want to do the top stitching for aesthetic purposes, but I do think on my version, I'm pretty sure I want to go ahead and skip the stitching for this version. But you can go ahead and do it once you have pressed your shoulder seams into place. My shoulders have been pressed into place, and this is what we're working with. Now at this point, we want to go ahead and baste our two yoke pieces together. So this is my yoke main and my yoke lining. I'm just going to lay my pattern piece flat, and then I'm going to pin them together and then baste around my neckline at the back. And I also want to baste the yokes together towards the arm side right here. Now, if you have followed the steps correctly, your shirt should now look like this. Now that I've got the main shirt constructed, I'm going to move it out of the way and grab for my collar pieces so that we can start constructing our collar. Alright you guys, there you had it, part 1 of the Stitch by Stitch series featuring the Grainline Archer Button Up shirt. I'm really hoping that you enjoyed the video so far, that you have picked up quite a few tips and tricks already, and that you are very eager to get started sewing up your very own classic button-down shirt or shirt dress pattern. Now if you enjoyed this video, be sure to go ahead and give me a thumbs up, leave me some comments down below and let me know what you think of the tutorial so far. If you have any questions about any of the things that I have demonstrated in this video, be sure also to ask them in the comment section and I'll do my very best to answer. If you have gotten this far and you're not yet a subscriber, then also please consider subscribing on your way out. But that is all I needed to share with you for part 1 of Stitch by Stitch, and I'll be back soon with part 2. So until then, stay calm, stay cool, stay safe, and get to stitching. Peace.